Hey there, people. So today we are going to be telling you all about all of the spears in Terraria, including which are the best spears. So this is my complete guide to spears. The main advantage of spears over swords in this game is multiple hits per stab or swing. The range, use time, velocity, and knockback of the different spears will vary, but I'm going to simply demonstrate each of these to keep the stats down a little bit. I know I tend to bombard you all with stats, so I'm going to try to keep it a little shorter by demonstrating all of these. I will talk about the base damage of each one. And since I can't really demonstrate it, the knockback stat is in a pretty small range of 4 to 7 knockback. So I can't show that against the dummies, but it's a fairly small range there. So the downside of swords, downside of spears versus swords is that they do not have auto swing or auto stab. That's something to be aware of. A few do have unique special abilities, though, particularly some of the ones I'm going to talk about towards the end. So let's get right into it. Pre-hard mode. There are 5 actually that you can get in pre-hard mode. It actually depends whether you have corruption or crimson, because one of them is only available in crimson worlds. But the first, easiest to find, most likely at the beginning of the game, is simply called the spear. And it's right here, and it has 8 base damage. It is found in regular surface chests. I will talk about its knockback because it has a relatively strong 6.5 knockback, the high end of that range, which makes it useful early in the game for holding back difficult enemies, or like standing in a doorway behind a doorway and like stabbing enemies through it, because you can basically hold them back by just continually stabbing through, and that way you're able to hit them. Or if you're running through the corruption or the crimson, you're able to keep those particularly difficult enemies away with that high knockback. So let's just give it a little demonstration here. That's your basic spear, and as you can see, it's right around that 8 damage value, except for the crits. So next one you're likely to find is called the Trident. You'll find it in water chests, particularly in the ocean, but you can find them underground and so on. It has 11 base damage if you're on an updated platform. That means the PC 1.3 equivalent, PS4, Xbox One for now. Or it's 10 base damage on the platforms that don't yet have that update. So that's my number 2 here. That's the Trident. And again, it's 10 or 11 depending on your platform. It has a slightly longer reach. If I get close enough to these dummies, if I get kind of right in the middle of the first one, you can see I can hit the 4th one there. And that's another thing about the spears, that obviously they do pierce through enemies and they score multiple hits. And that's why, despite the relatively low base damage, they actually can do a lot of damage. So there you go. Trident has a slightly longer range or reach there. And yeah, the one that's only available in Crimson Worlds is called the Rotted Fork. And I actually had to steal this from one of my other worlds. I did have one. And it actually has a pretty long range. Even if I'm not like halfway through that first one, I can hit 4. Or if I get over there, yeah, I can just hit the 5th. So it's pretty powerful. It has 14 base damage, and it's a chance to drop when you're breaking the Crimson Hearts. When you're in the Crimson, there's those Crimson Hearts, which eventually will summon the Brain of Cthulhu. The first one will also, have various effects on the world. But when you're breaking those, it's a chance that this Rotted Fork, it's called the Rotted Fork, and you'll notice the modifier actually goes in front of the. And which makes it look kind of funny, but that's what it's called, the Rotted Fork. And also on the updated platforms, you can get it on all platforms, but on the updated platforms you can also find it by getting Crimson crates from fishing in the Crimson. So there you go, that's that one. And next one, which is also by fishing actually, is the Swordfish. And despite the name, it's called the Swordfish, it acts like a spear. So you can see it actually has a short range, or a short reach, just like the basic spear, but it does have a higher damage value at 19 base damage, which is pretty decent for pre-hard mode, particularly with all those hits. And you can see it stabs quite quickly. That's the velocity stat, and also pretty rapidly. The use time is relatively low. I think it's 19 on that one, if I recall correctly. Again, I'm not going into all the stats, but you can get that by fishing in the ocean biome. So if you're fishing in the ocean biome, you have a chance to get this Swordfish, and it's a relatively good one if you're early in the game. It can carry you for a while. Last one you can get in pre-hard mode is the Dark Lance, and this has 29 base damage, which makes it quite powerful, or on the non-updated platforms it's 27, not a big difference. So updated 29, non-updated 27. It's found in shadow chests in the underworld, also known as hell, and it actually has a cool effect. You can see it emits these glowing particles. If it was nighttime, you would see these kind of sparkling, and you can see it has a very long range actually. I don't even need to be like partway into the first one for it to hit all 5 of those. And high damage, 29 or 27 depending on your platform, emits those glowing particles, which also makes it very useful for exploring underground. And that's actually all the ones for pre-hard mode. But this one can even be useful against the wall of flesh because it does have that piercing effect. You can take out those hungry tendrils that, you know, the wall of flesh has when it first appears. You can take them out reasonably easily with this by basically stabbing through them and scoring multiple hits. So let's move on. 1 second, I'm just going to swap some stuff. Okay, so you can see I've actually swapped all my weapons for bars, and that is because at the beginning of hard mode, there are actually a whole bunch of craftable spears that you can make. They have various names, but they're essentially all spears, and they are all made from bars of various types of ores. And basically, obviously, the higher tier ores is the better stats overall. So I've got my Cobalt, which is sort of the lowest, and then all the way up to Chlorophyte. I'm just going to review them fairly quickly here. So you can make a Cobalt Naginata, it's called, which has 29 base damage, same as that Dark Lance, from 10 Cobalt bars at your anvil. And this one and the Palladium one, the first two, you can make at a regular iron or lead anvil. You notice I've brought my hard mode anvil. This is an Orichalcum anvil. For the ones after the Cobalt and Palladium, you will need a Mythril or Orichalcum anvil in order to make those ones. But the Cobalt one, you can use a regular one, and the Palladium one as well. So we'll just go into our crafting menu here, and here it is, the Cobalt Naginata, 10 bars. I can make that, and then I can stab the dummies. And you'll notice this has a nice reach. So basically, it's fairly similar to that Dark Lance, ultimately. But it's also, you know, they both actually stab pretty quickly. If I pick that one up here, it might be a little bit quicker. Again, you know, I didn't actually note down all the use time, but they're both fairly quick. So next one, depending on your world, whether you have Cobalt or Palladium, you might be making a Palladium Pike instead. Palladium Pike has 32 base damage, requires 12 Palladium bars at your regular anvil. And so I put that in my number 2 here. And likewise, it has nice range, good damage, pretty quick, and there you go. But you can, of course, get better ores fairly quickly once you're into hard mode. So you can also make a Mythril Halberd, which has 35 base damage. That's from 10 Mythril bars. And that has a base of 35 base damage, and you will need a hard mode anvil to make that one. But you can see, a little stronger, similar range, similar speed. They're kind of similar, except gradually the better ores do a little more damage. So again, depending on your world, Mythril or Orichalcum, you might get an Orichalcum Halberd instead of a Mythril Halberd, and the Orichalcum one requires 12 bars instead of 10 for the Mythril. Again, ultimately pretty similar. Slightly shorter range, it looks like. Maybe. But yeah, they actually don't note the actual range stat on the wiki, which is interesting. You basically have to test them out to show that. It's pretty similar. So then, of course, you'll either have Adamantite or Titanium. I had Adamantite in my world, so I've actually used this one before. The Adamantite Glaive does 38 base damage. And you can see this has a little longer reach. I think it's a little faster as well. And of course that higher damage value. Now if you have titanium, you'll be making a titanium trident. That's 13 titanium bars because they like to make things just a little different for titanium for some reason. So there we go. And again, pretty good range, high damage. That's the highest of the ores that you can mine when you first get into hard mode. Of course you'll need the right equipment even to mine that. But there you go, titanium trident, 40 base damage. Then you can make the Gungnir, or Gungnir. I don't know how to say that, but yeah, I think it's Gungnir or something like that. And that's made out of hallowed bars. So of course, to get hallowed bars, you're going to need to defeat one of the mechanical bosses. But if you have 12 hallowed bars from one of them, you can make the Gungnir, and it's 12 hallowed bars, and that's just a little bit better yet at 42 base damage. And like many of the hallowed items, this one actually does emit light, so you can see that right there. It's got that nice sparkly effect, which also makes it useful for exploring underground. Although by this point you aren't exploring for quite as many things underground. But there you go, it might still be useful for you. And then of course, after you've defeated all 3 mechanical bosses, you can then get the stuff to mine Chlorophyte, and you can start getting Chlorophyte bars. So 12 Chlorophyte bars, you can make your Chlorophyte Partisan, and that has a nice, actually this is definitely better because not only it has 49 base damage, which is a nice boost over the previous ones, but also it has these little, see, it emits this little cloud. So even if I'm back here a little more, it actually emits that cloud, which scores like multiple hits. So not only the actual spear itself, but this is one of the ones that has a special ability. It emits these clouds, and as you can see, you can stack those up. So you can actually do quite a lot of damage with that Chlorophyte Partisan. And also that little cloud will go through walls, which, again, unlike the previous ones, that gives you the ability to attack through walls. The spear itself will not do damage through walls, but that cloud will. So keep that in mind. And again, after you've defeated actually at least one of the mechanical bosses, so you can actually get this earlier than the Chlorophyte Partisan if you're crafty and careful. The Mushroom Spear, which has 60 base damage, so that's a good big boost. This is actually a really powerful weapon at the time that you can first get it. You buy it from the Truffle NPC after defeating at least one of the mechanical bosses. Of course, you have to get your Truffle NPC by creating a surface mushroom biome at or above the surface of the world. I have a video on that if you're wondering, but once you have that, the Mushroom Spear, I use this as well myself actually. And this actually, interesting, it's not actually showing it right now because it's supposed to, yeah, there we go. Okay, maybe you can't see them because of the dummies, but it's got those spinning mushrooms, and those spinning mushrooms will do damage as well. So again, this is one of the few that actually has a special ability. So it creates these 7 spinning mushrooms in midair, and they'll actually sit there and continue to do some damage as long as they're still there. And they will also, like that Chlorophyte Partisan's little cloud, they will be able to damage through walls. So both of those can't go wrong. Chlorophyte Partisan or the Mushroom Spear, you can cause damage through the walls. So again, not the spear itself, but just those mushrooms will appear on the other side of walls and do damage there. The spinning mushrooms, though, only deal about 1/3 of the actual weapon damage, so that's about 20, but they will score a lot of hits, so it's still quite powerful. Another one, actually, this one I can't show you because it's only available on the old-gen consoles, mobile currently still, until the update probably, and 3DS. So it's only on those platforms for now. It's the Tonbogiri. It's a Japanese name, and I don't know how to pronounce it, but Tonbogiri, something like that. It does 56 base damage and has a small chance to inflict the poisoned debuff. So you'll actually need to craft your Gungnir from the hallowed bars first. You're going to need one of those 15 souls of blight, I believe those are from Ochram, and 15 adamantite or titanium bars at your hard mode anvil. So that's a craftable one as well, which is not on PC. So, but speaking of, instead of not on PC, the Ghastly Glaive, this is the only one that is still PC exclusive. The Ghastly Glaive is actually a drop from the Old One's Army event, which is still PC exclusive. It does 45 base damage. It's dropped by the Ogre during the Old One's Army event. And upon hitting an enemy, a dragon head appears, which flies back and forth and damages enemies, basically. So, there it is. It's flying like dragon spirit, and you'll notice it actually doesn't stab quite straight. It seems to be somewhat random, actually, how much it varies there, but yeah, has a little dragon head. doing some extra damage there. So there you go. That's a Ghastly Glaive. The base damage is fairly low, but that dragon head really amps that up a bit. So there's only 2 left. The Obsidian Swordfish, and those are the only ones that are platform specific, by the way, the Tonbogiri and the Ghastly Glaive. So Obsidian Swordfish, available on all platforms. You can actually get this technically anytime in hard mode, but it's not easy to get. It does 70 base damage and has an unusually high critical strike chance. You can see 24% critical strike chance, which is useful. You can get this anytime in hard mode, but it requires getting the hotline fishing hook first because it's caught when fishing in lava. The hotline fishing hook is an angler quest reward. It's pretty rare. I had to, actually no, I did have the hotline fishing hook in this world. I was looking for it in my other worlds because I didn't think I had it in this world, but I did. So I actually got this legit. I ended up getting like a whole bunch of them. I didn't have one and I went fishing and I got a ton of them. But I kept one, and here it is. It's the Obsidian Swordfish. It has a short range, actually. So it's like the original Swordfish in that regard, but obviously much more powerful at 70 base damage. And yeah, if you do a lot of fishing, if you get a lot of angler quest rewards, you can get your hotline fishing hook, go fishing in some lava, and you can pick this up technically very early in hard mode. So basically, you just need that hotline fishing hook, which is hard to get itself. And there you go, 70 base damage. And it's quite quick. I believe this is the quickest one, actually. So you might hear me clicking furiously because these are not auto swing or auto stab, if you will. But it's quite quick, but it's short range, high damage. So that can be very, very useful if you get it early. And last but not least, the North Pole. Mine's a weak North Pole, but that only affects the knockback. It's 73 base damage. This is later in the game. This is probably going to be quite late in the game that you would be likely to get this because it is a drop from the Ice Queen during the Frost Moon. And I basically went back and repeated the Frost Moon just to get this so I could show you guys. Killed a bunch of Ice Queens, and lucky enough, I did get it. So 73 base damage. It's not just a... It's a very nice spear, but not only that, you'll see a couple other things going on here. There's a projectile that fires out. So at the end of the stabbing motion there, it fires a projectile, and you'll notice that projectile, as it goes, is actually dropping snowflakes. And those snowflakes will cause damage. So actually, this is very, very powerful. Obviously, the most powerful in the game. It's got a good range to begin with, but on top of that, projectile and deadly snowflakes. So these are actually affected by gravity, so you can arc these. And if I kind of, maybe I'll want to zoom out a little for this one. I can arc that over top of my enemies and like basically hit a whole bunch of things at once. You'll notice that the snowflakes don't deal quite the same damage. So the projectile that fires out the end deals 80% of the actual spear's damage. So if I go here, you'll see the spear itself is doing a little more damage. The projectile towards the end there is doing a little less. Projectile deals 80% of the spear itself's damage, which is around 60. And the snowflakes deal 63% roughly, or 45 damage each. There you go. And yeah, you can actually, another strategy that you can use with this, if you're fighting a boss in particular, if it's one big tough enemy, you can actually fire this up and it will drop all those snowflakes all down in a line, which, yeah, obviously that's potentially incredibly powerful. If I use that on the dummies, it's a lot of those snowflakes because obviously the projectile goes quite a distance. And you can do a ton of damage using that little trick. So there you are. That's all of the spears in the game. Obviously, the North Pole is clearly the best, but you're going to get that very towards the end of the game. So hope you liked the video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.